Welcome, everybody. I'm just letting everybody in.
Oh, good. I was beginning to wonder if I'd had an IT malfunction.
You were the only one in at the beginning. You were first in the waiting room. So
well, that's good. You see, I can't help being a bit early like you would be if you were there in real life.
Yeah, indeed. And this is why I said I would open up the meeting beforehand, because usually you meet up in the foyer and have a bit of a networking opportunity, and that opportunity is completely lost when you attend Zoom meetings, where in professional Zoom meetings you usually get let in as a bulk. So I appreciate we're already so many people, but I will just do some coordination and let people in, and my co-host is able to let the rest of the team in as well. We're expecting over 80 people, so I don't anticipate we're all having the opportunity to have a chat together, but you can, if you wish, unmute yourself and introduce yourself to those who are there. Maybe Dr. Calver, you might want to start, as you were the first in, and encourage the rest to follow.
Oh, really? Hello. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Alison Calver. I'm the VP for training for the Cardiac Society. And I don't know what else you want me to say, Sarah.
No, that's all right. I will formally introduce everybody, but I thought...
I'm obviously a woman in cardiology.
Ah, I can see Dr. Rebecca Dobson as well. So hi, if you want to say hello to the rest of the team.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'm consultant cardiologist in Liverpool, and I'm also the newly appointed BCS Council member for Women in Cardiology. And I've just realised how messy my study is. I really need to work out how to blur my background.
I don't know how to do that on Zoom. I can do it on Teams. In fact,
I can, but not on this.
I sit on Teams, you know, in a sort of celestial bubble, which I find very satisfactory. But I can't find a thing on this that allows you to do that.
Oh well, we'll just have to put up with the mess.
You have to also have like a posh computer, because I tried it. You wouldn't believe that I spend the afternoon tidying up the office, so not have a messy screen. So, but my computer is too old for Zoom to accept the background. So, yes, that's okay. Hopefully we'll be not distracted. Anybody else want to say hello? We have got international audience. We've got Nafisa El Samani from Africa, who joined us, who's my colleague from the Global WIC group, and Aisha Kader from Bangladesh, who is was able to join us. If you want to say hello to the UK WIC team.
Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to meet all of you. I already know Shrila from before, so hi, and everybody else, hello. I'm currently an assistant professor in cardiology and training and intervention in Bangladesh, and originally from Sri Lanka. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you.
And there's my favourite honorary woman, Chris Allen. Splendid.
Oh, yes, we had to invite him as a token male person. Otherwise, we would get diversity issues. So, welcome, Chris. You're muted. You may
very happy to make up the numbers. Hello, everyone.
You can be a girl anytime you like, Chris.
And also, welcome.
We have Paul too, who has just logged on. You're an honorary female for the evening, Paul. You're muted.
No, Paul, we can't hear you. You've got your thing on.
I thought that'd be better. So yeah, no, this is great. It is like Celebrity Squares proper now, actually. So not many people remember that, actually. But
no, sadly I do. Or Blankety Blank was quite similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
All right, we have halfway through the participants.
Hi, Hannah.
Oh, hi, Eleanor. And we have
also got Simon Ray, president of BCS, there as well. Hi, Simon.
Hi there.
Hi, Simon.
Australia.
Oh,
Hi.
hello. Apologies. Hello, Professor A. I haven't seen you on my screen.
That's all right. No, I came up with a slightly strange name. I've just changed it. For some reason, it keeps defaulting to my home email address, so I've changed it. Good to see everybody.
And also welcome Hannah Sinclair, who has had good news today and who has done a great job before me and is now hopefully transitioning into a new role.
What's that, Hannah?
You're muted, Hannah.
I'm not. I've sort of been offered a bridging locum consultant job. Maybe.
Sort of been, mate.
Excellent. Good. Where's that then?
Just I'm at Tommy's at the moment, so just to.
Oh, good.
It's just a temporary thing until I sort out what I'm doing. Maybe it's all very unofficial. So
Not just
Oh, okay.
Hannah, it's really good. Well done.
We won't tell anyone, Hannah, don't worry.
No one knows, only the 85 of us.
I think I'm going to put myself back on mute. But thanks for organising this, though. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're very welcome to have random children popping in and out of the screens. We had dogs, we had cats at previous events. We had so this is all very welcome. But I think hopefully by this time we've chosen a time where little human beings are asleep, and we can transition into the adult part of the evening.
If only.
Otherwise, Disney Plus is usually great in free childcare, so that's usually my go-to babysitter. All right, we're letting in the last couple of people, and then I will start.
On me.
Yes, I think you probably ought to unmute yourself, but I will come to that in a minute.
So I've never been.
Oh yeah, I make you a co-host as well, just in case. So due to previous experience, if there was going to be a technical issue and foreign people who are not invited crash this meeting, we will just log on to the same meeting again, which has happened in the past. So yes. So I think we're probably having quite a few people here to start the meeting. Let me just see whether I can. Aisha will continue to let in the people, so that gives me the freedom to start the meeting, and there will be plenty of time for interaction. So welcome everybody. This is the third webinar, Women in Cardiology series. I'll just talk you through a couple of technical aspects because we're expected to be over 80 people. I'd like you to mute yourself if at all possible. If you have any questions, put them up in the chat, and we will try and come back to them during the panel discussion at the end. If you do wish to have a certificate, make sure that your name on Zoom is the name you want to wish to appear on the certificate, and you can change that at the 3 dots at the top of your picture. And if you want to be tagged on Twitter, Professor Kalra, then you should put your Twitter handle in the brackets of your name. This session is recorded, so for those who can't make it or who are interrupted and don't make it to the end, I will send a link around which you may want to share with those colleagues who won't be able to attend today. And of course, there will be a group selfie at the end, and I will be available after the event for chat. So this is the third Women in Cardiology event with which I'm hosting since I took over the role as our British Junior Cardiologists Association Women in Cardiology and Flexible Training Rep in June this year. The first event in July launched the mentorship program, which I initiated, where 30 mentees were matched with 11 mentors. In August, I organised a second event in collaboration with the global WIC group, with my co-founders Aisha Carter from Bangladesh and Sabida Kadavar, as well as Nafisa Al-Samani, who's here today, where women in cardiology from 5 continents showcase their work as part of a case competition. And the winning case is scheduled to be published at the European Heart Journal Case Reports. This is the 3rd webinar in the Women in Cardiology series, and this is focusing on the landscape of cardiology and the plan for the future. And I would like to use this opportunity to highlight a couple of dates for the next few months. So on the 15th of October, Rebecca Dobson, our British Cardiovascular Society WIC representative, is inviting you to an evening webinar about women in cardiac specialties. And on the 26th of November, we are organising an event to discuss less than full-time training. And we have the honour to welcome John Hussain, who's a Deputy Postgraduate Dean for less than full-time training, and also a consultant cardiovascular surgeon. And also Mr. Bill Kermani, who's a consultant cardiothoracic surgeon, will join us because he has previously taken 3 months of paternal leave. And as you might have seen on Twitter, our next global WIC event will take place on the 12th of December, and this will be an essay competition regarding the impact of COVID-19 on your life as a woman in cardiology. And in January, we will launch our collaboration with the Pink International Young Academy of Cardiology with a webinar regarding women in academia. So please get in touch if you want to get involved with any of those events or projects. There's a lot to do to solve the issues women in cardiology face. And now I would like to introduce my amazing panel who's kindly offered their free time to support women in cardiology. And I'm very privileged to have senior colleagues on our panel who many of us have looked up to for years, not only for their contribution to cardiovascular medicine, but also for their support for women in cardiology. And first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Dobson, who's a consultant cardiologist, specialist in imaging and cardio-oncology at the Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital. And she's also the British Cardiovascular Society Women in Cardiology rep, and who will give us an overview about the issues of women in cardiology. I would also like to welcome the president of the British Cardiovascular Society and consultant in interventional cardiology, Professor Simon Ray, who supported women in cardiology events in the past and who's kindly offered to give us his perspective on women in cardiology. And it is my honour to welcome Dr. Alison Calver, consultant in interventional cardiology in the University Hospital in Southampton and British Cardiovascular Society Vice President for Training and Chair of the Cardiology Specialist Advisory Committee at the Joint Royal Physician Training Board. I first met Dr. Calver at the portfolio station of my cardiology interview. It's a very stressful situation, but I felt valued as a person rather than just as a training number when she asked me at the end at the station what kind of person I am and what I do in my free time. And it encouraged me to value individuals' background before judging them, and I want to thank you for that. And last but not least, Professor Kalra, consultant cardiologist and specialist in heart failure and complex devices in Portsmouth Hospitals University Trust and past chair of the British Society for Heart Failure. I met him for the first time 10 years ago when I came to the UK during my attachment in medical school. And he's one of those people who walks comfortably down the corridor with such a stride length that you have to run next to him to keep up. And I had the opportunity to gain insight into his work during our walk from the cardiology department to the emergency department where we were heading. And he has continued to inspire me since. However, I chose anaesthetics as a career and I had successfully gained a number when he invited me for a Costa. And you consider this as a ridiculous question, but he asked me, why do you not do cardiology instead? We could work together on a research project. And this is the sort of question a mentor asks, a question you never consider even thinking about. Needless to say that I quit my number in anaesthetics and applied for cardiology. So I hope you all enjoy the next hour with these inspiring senior colleagues, and I will now hand over to Dr. Dobson to set the scene for women in cardiology.
Thanks, Sarah. That's a great introduction, and thank you for arranging this evening. It's so nice to be amongst like-minded people, even though it is over the internet. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Can you see that?
You just need to do presenter view.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So for those that don't know me, I'm Rebecca Dobson. I'm a consultant cardiologist specialising in imaging and cardio-oncology up in Liverpool. And I've also recently been elected to the BCS Council as the Women in Cardiology representative. And Sarah's asked me to talk tonight briefly about where we're up to in terms of women in cardiology and describe some of the data at both ends of the career spectrum, i.e. cardiology applicants and also consultant cardiologists. I'm going to start by making the point that the lack of women in cardiology is an issue for everyone. This is Madeleine Albright. She's the past American Secretary of State, and she said, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." And as a female cardiologist, I believe that part of my role is to encourage and support other women who may be considering a career in cardiology, and also to support fellow female cardiology trainees and consultants. But this isn't a problem that can be solved solely by women. And I know Professor Ray was laughing that I'd included Prince Harry in my presentation tonight, but I think this is actually quite a good quote. He said this recently when talking about equal opportunities, that this is not just about women. We need men to recognise the part that we play too. And real men treat women with dignity and give them the respect they deserve. It cannot just be women who speak up. And extrapolating from that, I think he makes a really important point that in order to progress and address the issue of women, or the lack of women in cardiology, we need both men and women in the room. So we'll start by looking at medical students. Now this is old data, I'm sorry I couldn't find anything more recent, but you can see that since 2000, women have outnumbered men and continue to do so. If you then look at cardiology specialty training applicants, it's clear that there's an issue here. Less women than men apply to cardiology. So this is data from the last 10 years, and women represent around 20% of cardiology NTN applicants. And this percentage has been fairly stable over the last 10 years, albeit increasing slowly over the last 3 or 4 years. And I was quite pleased when I received this data from Alison just this week, that actually there was 28% of applicants were female in 2020. And if you look at the gender of successful applicants, women are slightly more successful at selection, accounting for around 30% of NTNs each year, with 2020 being the best year yet, with 36% of NTNs being awarded to female applicants. If you then head to the other end of the spectrum and look at cardiology consultants, you can see that the specialty has the highest number of consultants and higher specialty trainees, yet the lowest proportion of women, with just 14% of cardiology consultants being female. And then if you look at female representation at annual cardiology conferences, you see a similar picture. Now this is currently unpublished data, and I've got to thank Rachel for helping me compile this. But if you look at the gender of speakers at national cardiology conferences, and I've anonymised them for this because the data is very new. So this is data of the last few years, looking at 3 different national cardiology organisations and looking at what percentage of speakers at those conferences were female. And you can see that women are underrepresented. They account for around 20 to 30% of speakers, with no real improvement over time. So why is this important? Why are we all spending our Thursday evening chatting about this on a webinar? Why do we need more women in cardiology? Well, I think we all recognise that diversity is a good thing, and that by having such a gender skew within cardiology, we're missing out on some excellent, talented female doctors who are choosing other career paths. And if cardiology remains a predominantly male specialty, with a diminishing pool of men as more and more women enter medical school, we're going to have a smaller pool of talent and significant workforce issues in the future. So lastly, what do we do about the issue? Why is this an issue? Historically, there's been a lack of visible female role models within cardiology. And I firmly believe that if a medical student or a junior doctor can't see someone who looks like them within the specialty, they may think that they are less likely to succeed. Cardiology training has, and in some cases still is, inflexible, and this may put women off as they have concerns about balancing other commitments such as family. And I'm afraid to say that cardiology still has quite a bad reputation for being an old boys club, with sexist behaviour still evident, as suggested by the recent BJCA trainee survey. I think in the past there's been a lack of encouragement of women into the specialty, and this is one of the things I'm really keen to address through my role with BCS. And finally, there are a lot of myths within cardiology. You can't be a cardiologist and have a family. You can't work part-time as a cardiologist, etc., etc. And I think it's all of our responsibility to address and correct these imperceptions. I'll leave it there and hand back to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dobson. That was great in setting the scene. And I would like to hand over to Professor Simon Ray and ask him what the British Cardiovascular Society is doing to support women in cardiology.
So thanks very much indeed, Sarah. And I mean, it's a pleasure to be asked again to talk at one of these meetings, because they are generally good fun. I enjoy the atmosphere, and I think it combines useful discussion with a very serious and important subject. So I think just to pick up on one or two of the themes that Rebecca raised. So we'll start with awareness. And I think one of the issues is that cardiology as a career has been something which just hasn't really crossed the radar significantly of women in the past at early stages of their career. So I think, and Rebecca alluded to this, that one of the things that we need to do, and we are doing, is to make contact with female medical students at the beginning of their career, even before they really get exposed to different clinical specialties, to emphasize that cardiology is interesting, it's good fun, it's accessible to anybody who wants to do it, who has sufficient energy and drive, and that cardiology is a specialty which welcomes people from both sexes and all backgrounds. And I think it's important to emphasize that whilst we have a significant problem with under-recruitment of women, it's important to look at this as part of an overall drive to get more diversity into our consultant workforce, reflecting the population that we serve. So I think there's a big thing around awareness, and we've been supporting largely through the efforts previously of Cara Hendry, and now Rebecca will be taking this over, through the Women in Cardiology representatives, of having a presence at careers days at medical schools. I think the second thing that we can do, and we've started to do, is to try where it's possible to do so, is to put women in positions where they will be recognized. And there are a few ways that we can do that. So last year we set up the Emerging Leaders Program through the BCS. So this is taking cardiology trainees in their last year or so of training, and early career consultants up to about 3 years of consultant appointment, and putting them through a very high level training program. Rebecca was one of the people who's been through the first cohort. And we were very careful in that we selected as many women as we possibly could, and we have done the same again for the second cohort, so that we have full representation of women in those cohorts. At a slightly more advanced level of career progression, we also have the opportunity, through our links with the ACC and the European Society of Cardiology, to nominate cardiologists for leadership training in what the Americans term mid-career. And again, we have been very careful for the last few years to make sure that we have a disproportionate number of women being nominated for those roles, recognizing that we don't have enough women in leadership roles within the society. And this is a very prominent way of doing that. And similarly, through the society, through our links with the ACC and the ESC, we get invited to nominate individual cardiologists for faculty, particularly for the ACC meetings. And again, we've been trying to ensure that we have at least 50% of those invited slots going to them, because these are very high profile. These are people with significant academic profile. We have a number of very high profile female cardiology academics in the UK who've done very well in terms of their presentations and their academic roles at the ACC meeting. I think the point that you make, or that Rebecca makes, about the presence at UK meetings is also well made. And the way that you get around that is that you make sure that you have enough female cardiologists on the groups that decide who is going to be speaking at the meeting. So much of the BCS structures are around elections, and I'll come back on at a moment. So we can't fix elected roles. We can try, but we can't actually do it. But what we can do is to co-opt individuals onto the key committees, particularly the programme committee. And 50% of those co-opted posts are women, and they are beginning to have a very significant role now in the nature of the programme, and specifically with one eye on making sure that every single session we are looking at with a critical eye to make sure that it is not excessively male dominated, as we make sure that it is not excessively dominated by one centre, for instance. And whilst, I mean, slightly facetiously said we can't fix elections, and clearly we can't, but what we can do is to encourage people to stand for election. And one or two of people in the audience or on the faculty have been on the receiving end of my gentle encouragement to apply for posts. And I think that's entirely appropriate. And I suppose the final thing I would say is around culture. And I think the BJCA survey was very well timed. It made extremely uncomfortable reading, I think, for everybody in senior positions in cardiology in the UK, because nobody likes to think that they or their colleagues are behaving in that way to trainees. And it was I think quite a wake-up call. As a society, we fully endorse that survey, the publication of the survey and the results of the survey. And largely as a result of that, I've asked Cara Hendry, again as our previous Women in Cardiology representative, to draft a broad policy around discrimination and the avoidance of discrimination within the BCS that will be finalised soon. And I think it is important that we as a society publicise the fact that the cardiology still has a problem. I think a lot of people would like to feel that that's gone away over recent years. I think it is better, but it certainly hasn't gone away. And I suppose, just to finish off, one of the key measures of success for me would be if your post and Rebecca's post were redundant. We didn't need them. So when we don't need representatives for women in cardiology, that's a pretty decent bellwether that the problems have gone away. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray. We will come back to parts of what you said in the panel discussion, and I would like to invite Dr. Calver to talk about her perspective on women in cardiology, both as a female cardiologist as well as in your role as the Vice President for Training.
Well, I'd echo a lot of what Simon said. What I find a bit sad is that I'm often talking to people and saying, why don't you do cardiology? And they suck their teeth, a bit like the plumber who comes to look at your boiler and says, oh, who have you had in here, love? And they go, oh, it's too difficult. Oh, and this is men and women, actually, who are SHOs, who have a perception that our specialty is very, very hard. and therefore impossible, and that your forehead will become very flat because you are bashing it against a brick wall. And I suppose I would really want to encourage people to say, well, don't take any notice of any of that. When I was an SHO, I was told by the eminent professor at the august institution at which I worked when I went to see him, because I liked cardiology, you know, on the whole, in those days, you either made people better or they didn't survive. You know, heart failure treatment was not what it is now. And so we didn't have a large quantity of patients who were difficult to manage. And when I went along and said, oh, I'd quite like to do cardiology, he sucked his teeth across the desk at me and said, oh, you can't do that, you're a girl. And, you know, thankfully, I just didn't believe him because I was just so astonished. Nobody had ever said that to me at all, that you couldn't do anything because you were a girl. And I went back and asked the men who I worked for, who were much more clinically orientated, who looked at me as if I'd just come from Mars and said, well, why can't you do it because you're a girl? That's ridiculous. And so my message, I think, to people is don't believe people who suck your teeth. If you like it, give it a go. Do not wake up when you're 50 and wonder, what if? Could I have done it? Would it have been okay? My message to absolutely everybody is give it a go. If it doesn't work, humans are very adaptable. You can think of something else. But don't wake up when you're 50 with a feeling of regret, when perhaps you see some people who did give it a go and have got what they wanted, and you spend the rest of your life wondering, could it have been okay? Because for the most part, it will be okay. You'll find your niche. Cardiology is a massively broad church. I'm an interventional cardiologist, so I poke things in people all the time, but you don't have to do that. You know, there's a massive wealth of opportunity. You can like chronic people and look after heart failure if you like. That isn't me. You can spend your life in a dark room with funny signals if you're an EP doctor. There are all sorts of things you can do. It can appeal to all sorts of different personality types. And just, you know, don't believe those people who say you can't do it. And from the point of view of the myths that Rebecca talked about, this is absolutely true. Of course, you can be a cardiologist and have a family. Lots of us on this call have got families. That's not to say you have challenges. It's not to say that, you know, it's always plain sailing. But of course, you can have a family. And your children do not, by definition, end up being delinquents. I mean, mine are as delinquent as anybody else's. As far as I can see, they seem perfectly normal and well adjusted. Actually, they're quite proud of what their mum does, you know, and when they were very small and were asked at school to write little paintings of what their dad does and mum do, they wrote they drew a picture of their dad, and underneath it they wrote, he eats curry and likes beer. Both of these things are true. And under a picture of their mum, they wrote, she fixes people's hearts. And, you know, I'd take that quite happily. So you can definitely have a family. You have to be very, you know, I'm sure everyone else who's done these things would agree, you know, you've got to be pretty good at getting the childcare sorted out, because you cannot have people ringing you up at work asking if they can open the window. So you have to have good childcare. You have to think carefully about that. But if you do sort that out, of course you can go off and be a cardiologist, and people needn't even know you have small children if you don't choose to tell them. You can work in the cath lab when you're pregnant. Radiation protection is very well sorted out these days. If you don't believe in lead aprons, then actually it's not the specialty for you, and you should go and do something else. But you can work in the cath lab perfectly safely. People work at Sizewell when they're pregnant, so I'm sure the cath lab is you know, not in that order. And I think I would just really, really want to say, just don't believe these people who suck their teeth. Now, you will meet people who are sexist bastards. There's no doubt about that. But actually, they are getting fewer and further between. Their behavior is, you know, not deemed to be acceptable by anybody now, and their colleagues are calling them out and telling them, you know, not to do it and sending them on behavior modification programs, or they're retiring. So, you know, that's not an excuse either. So if it's what you want to do, get out there and try it. If it doesn't work, then do something else. but don't not do it because someone else told you it was too hard. I think I'll stop.
I think I hope I don't just speak for myself, but I think we're all quite mesmerized by this talk and feel totally energized. I can't say it because obviously I work with Professor Kalra, but you know, I would consider interventional cardiology now you've done your talk. So thank you very much for this, and I would like to hand over to Professor Kalra for the panel discussion.
Right, thanks Sarah, thanks everyone for their great contributions. I think just before opening up, it's probably appropriate for me to thank on behalf of all of us, pass our thanks on to Sarah for organising this, and she's done an absolutely superb job getting so many of you on this webinar, put a huge amount of effort into it. If you want to see drive and enthusiasm to be able to deliver something, then you've got a fine example here, and this is all on Sarah's maternity leave, of course, that she's doing this. So I think you've done a great job, and one of the key things that you wanted from this was not to leave with negativity, it's to try and find positives and solutions to how to move forward, and I think that really is the right way forward. Just before carrying on, I did want to clarify a couple of things as well. So my stride length on ward rounds, well, that solely came from chasing after Dr. Calver, actually. When I started as a junior registrar and she was my senior registrar at Southampton, and I must say that I'm sure Alison has inspired many women in cardiology, but she's also been very inspirational to many men in cardiology too. So she's a really good role model, and that's important. It isn't just inspiring women, it's inspiring everybody, of course. And secondly, that I treat everyone as equals. So when I did take Sarah for a Costa coffee, I did make sure she bought it, actually. So before going on to encourage her to come into cardiology, and it looks like there's another trip to Costa due if she's thinking about going into interventional cardiology to try and rectify that misdemeanor. But so moving on and opening it up, and we obviously do want to get input from as many of you as possible. But I think there are a few specific things we wanted to come on to talk about, Sarah. But coming on there, that I think, you know, Alison, you mentioned get out there and get it and go and try it, and Simon had mentioned about focusing and targeting medical students, and that's excellent. How do we get that enthusiasm and message out to junior doctors coming through, you know, their cardiology attachment, which is a great opportunity to entice people into the specialty, and how do we encourage our colleagues, our consultant colleagues or registrars as well, to inspire the F1s, F2s to come and commit to cardiology and not feel as though you know, it's a drab job of filling out a few blood forms. I don't know if Simon, do you want to open up there?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Paul. So I'll go back to my own experience, which, to be fair, was a very long time ago. And I was all set to be an endocrinologist, and I did my last attachment on my 2-year SHO rotation was in cardiology, and I was fortunate to be attached to three cardiologists who were genuinely inspiring individuals, and they did it. And I thought the job they did was the most interesting job I'd ever seen, and it was what I wanted to do. And from that moment, I had no doubt that was what I wanted to do. And so I think if we're going to, we do need to sell the specialty, and I think we've got to remain conscious of that, because I think it's very easy, particularly, and if you take the situation on a busy on-call week, which we'll all have experience of, and the temptation on ward rounds is to focus on the fact that you've got a whole bunch of people to see, you need to get through them quickly, you need an awful lot of decision making to be made. But I think it's important always to have at the back of your mind that it's not a question of keeping at the back of your mind that you need to be teaching. I would look at it slightly differently and see each ward round as a sales opportunity, if you like, that you need to be selling why this is interesting, why what you are doing is important, recognizing that the opportunities for SHOs to come into the cath lab are very limited now, and SHO level equivalents are very limited now. And I think there is a job for all consultants and registrars to do in that respect. I think we also need to make sure that we do the utmost to encourage trainees to come to clinics when they get the opportunity, and specifically those clinics where there are the more interesting and more challenging patients present. And I think if that is a continuing focus, it will go a long way to try and attracting people into cardiology. And I think you could, and I would absolutely buy everything that Alison says about encouragement being key. And if you see, as we all do on a regular basis, keen, able trainees, then we should be encouraging them and actually selling our specialty. And it did, to some extent, you can regard it as a bit of a competitive process. You know, we are competing with gastroenterology and respiratory medicine and renal. And from purely selfish grounds, because you want decent colleagues and you want good cardiologists to look at you to look after you as you get older, encouraging the brightest and the best into cardiology is absolutely the right thing to do.
Myself, any comments or points about that? I agree, Simon. I think I think most of the interaction is on the wards, of course, and at a time point where I think we're often all very rushed and feel under pressure, and it is really important to reflect and still demonstrate the real enthusiasm that I'm sure we all have for the way we deliver care for patients, and thrive from seeing, how well patients do. Alison, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo what Simon said. I mean, he and I are getting old. We want some good people to look after us when we get really, infirm. And I have to say that every time I see a really good doctor, they're in the corner being asked why they don't want to be a cardiologist. And when they tell you they want to do gastroenterology, I can think of a million reasons why you do not wish to be a gastroenterologist. I mean, namely, you have to look up people's bottoms and you fill them with air and then they fart in your face. I mean, why on earth would you want to do that for the rest of your life? Cardiology is nice and clean. I mean, we have a bit of blood about the place, but, on the whole, this is nice and clean. And, I think absolutely you've got to use every single opportunity you can. Every time you see a good SHO or a good F1, it's, come on, why don't you want to be a cardiologist? And they'll say, oh dear, it's very difficult. And, I think you've got to say, well, it's not that difficult. It can be done if you're enthusiastic. I don't, Claire Appleby, you're much younger than me, and you have just become the secretary of BCIS, which is a absolute bastion of male bastards. And what do you think?
It's still a bastion of male bastards, but no, I agree with what you said, and certainly what I remember. Simon will remember the old Withington Hospital, which is where in Manchester. My very first clinical attachment as a third-year medical student was on coronary care, and that's when I fell in love with cardiology. And I try and do that on ward rounds, but also on call, when we've got the tier ones coming in to sort of, sometimes it's you just look after the primary patient while we get them ready for the lab, and I always try and say, come into the lab, follow us through with that patient. It's absolutely what you say about getting across the passion that we have for our individual subspecialties, but cardiology as a whole. And I do think, getting people clearly before the cardiology trainee is the important bit, because you're already in the specialty. We've got to get hold of the medical students and the tier ones, and that's what's so important. And I think Rebecca said it, you can't be what you don't see. So we've got to make ourselves as visible as possible. And that's what I think will encourage people in.
Okay.
Having said that, I am joking, of course, when I refer to people in BCS as a load of bastards. Some of my best friends are interventional cardiologists, and there are lots.
I'm not joking, Alison.
There are lots of splendid men out there, and I think one thing that is important is that you know, while seeing lots of women is good, and actually I'm not a surgeon, because in my time, you know, there were absolutely no female surgeons, and I really did think that my forehead would become extremely flat if I tried to be a surgeon. So of course I've ended up in the most surgical medical specialty there is, because it didn't really occur to me that interventional cardiology was actually surgery, but done through very small holes. And so you don't, while you know, it's good to see lots of women doing these things, I don't think you need to necessarily that it's only women who can encourage you. And I'm sure, you know, Paul and Simon and Chris and the other chaps who've been brave enough to come to this today would probably agree with that. You know, mentors don't have to be women. Some of the best people who've whispered in my ear over the years about what to do next have been men. Certainly all the people who trained me were men, because actually there weren't any women in my time, because I am so old. You know, don't. So I think another message would be, don't get too fixated about the whole women issue. You know, good people need to do cardiology, and it doesn't matter what sex you are. And just don't be put off. Just don't be put off. Don't wake up when you're 50 and think, could I have done it?
Good. So Sarah, one of the things that you're very keen to develop is to get a comprehensive registry of women in cardiology, and in particular, starting with trainees. And I think it's right to say at the moment that we still are uncertain as to what happens to all of the trainees that start out. That is, do all of the women that start out with a NTN complete that and go on to get a consultant post? And I think those will be really, really important data to hold and find out what happens to people, and hopefully, of course, try to ensure that with all the appropriate support and encouragement, that once people have got so far into their training that they continue it to complete and get to do what they've hopefully always wanted to do, and that is to be a consultant cardiologist. But did you want to say a little bit about that, Sarah?
Yes, thank you very much. So we know that we have 50% of female medical students, and 50% of core medical trainees are female. However, we only have 28% of female cardiology registrars. So we're, as Dr. Dobson already highlighted at the beginning, we're losing talent at that stage. However, what is even more astonishing is that we then end up with only 12% of female cardiology consultants, and it raised the questions: what happens to these doctors? Do they stop being doctors? Do they go to a different specialty? We don't really know how many female trainees there are, how many female applicants there are, how many female cardiology consultants there are. In theory, you would assume the deaneries have that information. However, having tried over the last couple of months, it is quite a tedious way to distract that data. And I think it would be beneficial to us all to have a registry where we can have a status quo and assess how many female trainees are there. And in a couple of years' time, let's say in 5 years' time, do the same again and assess how many have made it to the consultant post, and if they don't, why didn't they go to consultancy? And I'm hoping with these events, I encourage people to get in contact with me, and this registry is, for my plans, more from the bottom up rather than the top down. So if you want to be part of it, tag me on Twitter or email me or text me, and I will put you on a list, and then I will start a newsletter for us all and hopefully get some data. And in an ideal world, this should really be captured by the British Cardiovascular Society.
I'm sure that's right. That if with the inspiration to set this up, I'm sure it would be good to have the data you know, officially kept within the BCS or BJCA. I mean, Simon, would you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, I would. So it's easier for consultants. It's relatively straightforward because the numbers, the RCP have now pretty good data on the numbers of consultants and the gender distribution, and importantly the age distribution, because clearly that varies very substantially. And you know, like I'm even older than Alison. In fact, that sounds very pejorative. I am older than Alison, and and
you can be even older than me. I don't mind that.
And when I was doing my training, I at no stage did I work alongside a female trainee, and I trained at an age where you travelled around a lot. So I worked in 4 different cardiac centres before I became a consultant in a 5th. And on that entire training journey, there was 1 female consultant, and clearly that is now changing, but it is not changing fast enough. And I think it is a good idea so in my mind, the main thing about the registry really is to track people's experience as much as anything else as they go through their training. And so I think there is an important purpose to it. And it'd be certainly, from my perspective, it will be something I'd be very keen that the BCS supports. And we should talk about that more. And it'll be a good link between the BJCA and the BCS. So yeah, agree.
So as the SAC, we do have the data about CCT. And we do have the data, we collect the data because nobody else does actually. The college don't collect it. We collect the data about advanced modules, and there will be called themes for service in the new curriculum, and the gender, you know, distribution of people who do them. So we've collected it probably for about definitely the last 5 years and possibly a little bit before that. But we can say how many people get a CCT in intervention, say, who are women and men, and how many people get a CCT in heart failure and devices and so on. So we do have that data, but it's extraordinary that actually nobody else collects it. We don't have any data at all about people who start off with NTNs and then don't, for some reason, get to the end. Although actually I think that is a very, very small number. There are some people who take quite a long time to get to the end, and that they are often women who've gone off and had lots of periods of maternity leave. And, you know, in the old system before ARCPs, when you had RETAs, which I can't even remember what that stands for now, but it was the way things were assessed. You know, there were some people who were getting through on the old system 15 years after it had been abolished and ARCPs had come in, because they'd had lots of periods of maternity leave and they'd gone and done out of program activities and so on. So we have no data at all about people who don't end up at the end. But my gut feeling from seeing people come through, and I signed everybody's CCT for 3 years, and Mark Westwood does it now. I think the number of people who actually end up not finishing is very small for both men and women, actually. But if people take time out, which is often for women maternity leave, and for men sometimes paternity leave, although less so, there are a few men doing less than full time in cardiology, but people taking time out for out of program experience or research, that elongates how long it takes them to get through. But I think there are relatively few people who don't get to the end in the end.
I think one thing which would, I mean, one of the advantages I see in the approach of an informal registry as well, particularly around gaining experience, individuals' experience, is that what I would be particularly interested in to see is if there are people who attain a CCT but don't take up a consultant post, and also is what happens. That we have reasonably good data from the RCP about people who are in consultant posts, but what we don't know is how many people who leave consultant posts and go off and do other things. And whilst I suspect those numbers are not huge, they are still out there, and I think it will be very important to know why that happens. Very important.
No,
yeah, and I'm sorry, I just had a fly here. I'm pleased to say that Dr. Dobson and I are working closely together, and hopefully we'll be able to extend that to the consultant body as well as just the trainees, but it is a start. We have to start somewhere.
And Sarah, just discussing about trainees and they come through and the sort of support that, you know, one might be additionally offering them, and, you know, something that you've been working on, a mentorship program. Again, it's probably opportune to share that with everyone and talk about where that might go to, where what that might lead on to in future.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have set up a mentorship program for female cardiology trainees, and this was launched at an event in July where we had 11 very inspiring mentors. Some of them are part of this evening tonight, who have offered to take on mentees, and together we have gone through workshops. So we've managed to recruit 11 mentors and 30 mentees and have matched them. All of these have gone through a training program with workshops. And these workshops were basically there to understand what mentoring is, and to understand the nature of developmental mentoring and the key behaviors of each stakeholder and the role of a mentee and a mentor, and to manage the expectation of both parties. And the goal of this mentorship program, or mentoring as a whole, is to get the best out of people. And it is not like the clinical supervisor or the educational supervisor who's goal directed, more like a coach based to work towards a goal and achieve it, more to a holistic approach to offer a safe space for female cardiology trainees for conversation about confidential things, about worries, about how to deal with the work-life balance, and in general just to discuss their worries and fears. And during these workshops, it became very clear that a mentor is not somebody to give advice, it's somebody to give context to the trainee. And I think this is something a person who you work with in the deanery or in your own department are unable to do. And we're very happy to have matched everybody outside their deanery. And I think that's certainly one benefit COVID offered us, is we're all familiar with Zoom and now able to match people all across the country, all across specialties, all across genders and ethnicities. So the aim of the programme is to ultimately improve personal and professional well-being of female cardiology trainees. And in the ongoing process of the programme, we will have a workshop where they learn how to transition from a mentee to a mentor in order to recruit the SHOs and the medical students. Not that it's a competition, but we might make one out of it to recruit female medical students and SHOs, mentor them into the specialty.
Good. And no, that sounds excellent, and that's a really promising and impressive start again. So we really look forward to seeing the success of that. Coming back to Rebecca, your initial presentation, and something that we discussed before about raising the profile of women at academic meetings and into academia per se. And I mean, I appreciate you've got a bit more work to do on the conferences, but it still looked pretty poor. So it was around 25% or less, I think, in the majority of those meetings of women being speakers. Have you got any other comments or thoughts on how we might improve that further?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. We've only just started collecting the data in the last few weeks, so I'm conscious that I don't want to name any particular society until we've double checked all the data, but actually across the board it's pretty poor, and it hasn't changed in the last 5 years. I think in terms of what we do about it, Simon's exactly right. With the people that are are deciding who they're going to invite to talk, that board of people needs to be equal and diverse and representative of who we want talking. The only other way I see this improving is by calling it out, and we see this more and more frequently now. If there's a manel, then it does get called out, and someone points out, well, where are the women? So I think it's pointing it out to people, not accepting it, and hopefully things will start to improve, but I think it will take time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think getting the program directors and getting a group of program directors, as you say, reflecting the appropriate diversity is essential. Absolutely.
Well,
I should say for the BCS program committee, that it is a focus of people. There are two things: geography and having panels that are not all one sex, because in the past people have been, the conference has been criticised for being too, say, London centric and not having any women. And it's a shame that this year's conference had to be cancelled, because I can tell you, having sat on that committee, the panels were diverse. There was probably a female representative in almost every single panel that existed. A large proportion of the talks were going to be given by women. And it was also geographically spread. So the trouble is, of course, when people are asking, oh, do you know someone who could give a talk on X? Then, of course, people, say the people who come to mind. And perhaps we are our own worst enemies. I know it's no secret among people who know me well, I hate giving talks. And actually, I have to be persuaded very heavily to, produce slides and go anywhere to give a talk. So, perhaps, I'm not helping, because actually, if you offer me a choice of not giving a talk or giving a talk, I'm going to take not giving a talk. And there may be lots of other people out there like me. So I think program committees are starting to wake up that you need to give lots of women lots of more time, if you like, or profile. And those of us who are there and might be asked to talk, try not to say no when someone asks you, I suppose. I mean, I hate it, but, I do it, I suppose. But I need a lot of notice, and don't ask me to do it at short notice. And I'm not one of those people in the front row changing my talk while the bloke in front of me is just giving his. Can't do it like that. Need to have it all sorted out several weeks in advance.
You look very comfortable talking tonight, Alison.
Oh yeah, but I haven't got any slides, have I? If someone else made me the slides, I mean, that would be fine. But it's making the bloody slides. I can't bear it. I'm hopeless at it. I'm just not very good at it.
I think you're very good at, once we coax you out of your shell, you're very good at it. So I just want to add a couple of things, because I mean, I would obviously endorse everything that Alison said about the excellence of the meeting that we couldn't have because of COVID. But there has been a very conscious move to a geographical spread, to a gender spread in terms of the presenters. But I think it's worth putting this in a slightly wider context, is that if you go back 5 or 10 years, the people who were chairing the sessions, predominantly the speakers, tended to be quite senior, mostly male. And the demographics of cardiology are such that if you stick with the fact that everybody is senior, you're still going to be stuck with mostly male panels, because that's who most of the senior cardiologists are. And so I think part of this is we've been making conscious efforts to have more trainees presenting and chairing, and a very conscious effort that it isn't the usual faces who are presenting, that we want people at earlier stages in their careers to be both presenting and in particular chairing. And I think if you do that, almost by default, you have a larger female presence. And so I think it's just part of a wider move to make the panel, to unstereotype panels, and particularly chairs at meetings. And we've been making a very conscious effort to do that, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, fully agree. And we've had the same in the BSH. And have we got any comments or questions or points of view? Aisha, have you got?
Yes, So, yes, there's, oh God, many hands. Shazia Hussain, you want to go first?
Hi everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Loud and clear.
So I was just going to make a point that having trained in interventional cardiology and having been through the process, I mean, I welcome all the initiatives that you're doing and they're great. But certainly in my training, what I missed the most and what I get now from, I'm on the Emerging Leaders program with Rebecca, is a informal supportive network of females who know what you're going through, who you can vent to about any rubbish that you want to, and it's in a confidential, secure environment. And I think Rebecca will back me on this, you know, that there's, you know, anytime we've got an issue, we'll call each other, we'll ring each other. I mean, we don't necessarily need a formal framework to address our issues. We just need somebody to understand. And had that been there in training, I think certainly it would have made training a much more pleasant experience. And when we talk about attrition, I mean, I was I think a fairly dedicated trainee, but as Claire mentioned, you know, the bastion of bastards in the BCIS conference, I remember going there in the middle of my training, having done my PhD, sitting there and thinking, this is not me. I do not want to be part of this. These people do not represent me, and I'm going to leave. And that was a serious thought that I had. I mean, luckily I'd managed to get some coaching formally, and that helped me out of it. But if I'd had that informal support throughout my training, it would have made things a lot easier. So I don't know if there's any way you can put like-minded people together in a secure manner. So that's what I want to say.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think you raise a really important point, and that comes back to the mentorship program where we are creating that safe space. And I'm hoping that we're not only having interactions between the mentee and the mentor, which is a confidential environment, but also having events like today or events around the mentorship program where we can network and connect with each other and exchange details and speak to each other. And I think we can't expect within a couple of meetings to connect, but we will be working together for hopefully many more years to come. And if we connect now and share our fears and worries, we will succeed together.
Paul, can I just come in again briefly just around the BCS, the Emerging Leaders program, because you know, when we set that up, we didn't really expect what Shazia describes to happen. It wasn't really one of the intended outcomes that there will be this mutual support group. And to me, that's been a hugely pleasant surprise, because this is not the first time I've heard that comment. And I think it is something that we intend to continue doing. Obviously, it makes the fact that we can't do face-to-face stuff makes it a bit trickier, but we're going to be running a second cohort this year, and I think and I'd be interested in people's views on this, but my intent is that we build up a series of cohorts of people who've gone through this program, who are able both to develop the kind of mutual support groups that you describe, but also in turn successive cohorts will act as informal mentors for the cohorts coming behind them. And once you run that, so we're putting 15, 20 people a year through that. Once you run that for a few years, I would like to believe that you start to have enough people to make a substantial change in culture. Now, once you've got 100 cardiologists coming through that program, now that is a substantial minority of the consultants in the country. And so, you know, I'd like to think that could be a pretty powerful mechanism for, pretty powerful lever for change.
No, I think that's sounds absolutely appropriate, Simon, and you know, again, a great aspiration. And I mean, just on Shazia, similarly, something we've done from the BSH, we started, I think, 3 years ago, it was just a day for recently appointed consultants in the first year, 18 months of appointment. And the idea was to be discussing some of those things that are real challenges during that time. But actually, one of the recurring feedbacks from that was getting a group of 20 people together. In fact, we organise a sort of dinner and drinks in the evening, which of course is difficult at the moment, but it's how people went forward from that to form the groups to support each other, to discuss things, to be able, you've had a bad day, you've had your first complication as a consultant or whatever it is, and you've got the phone to pick up to someone and discuss it and get that peer support. And I think that's really important, and we've continued that from the BSH, and it might be something that that could happen within other affiliated groups too, in addition to the program that you're running.
So. No, I completely agree. And also that I think the challenges change as you go through your consultant career. So certainly what we're facing at the moment is different. I mean, we've had people go, oh, look, somebody's talked to me like this. Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? Should I say something? Should I not? And then, I mean, I don't know whether this is specific to our gender and women. I suspect, and I've seen it in other places, that as we get higher up the ranks and we go on to management, there are different challenges of women being in leadership positions within hospitals. And certainly I know that amongst us, we will all be there to support each other, because there will be increasingly more and more tricky situations as we progress through. But it's a great initiative, Simon.
Agreed, yeah.
And Lynn Miller, did you want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
I just wanted to go back to something that Simon said about trying to essentially sell our specialty to more junior colleagues. And so I'm a general cardiologist with specialist interest in ACHD and obstetric cardiology, and our students and our F1s and our F2s who come through essentially are stuck in an inpatient environment, and their experience of cardiology is hugely driven by ACS, heart failure with a sprinkling of endocarditis. And as Alison said, we know cardiology is a broad church, but I don't think that they do. And I think we need to think carefully about how we can expose them to the lesser known subspecialties. I know Simon had mentioned going to clinics. We find that a real problem. I work in a very busy DGH. We have really few juniors on the wards, and it is incredibly difficult to get them to have a period of time where they can go and sit in a clinic, and I'm not sure, it's the best part of 15 years since I worked in a tertiary centre, so I don't know how it is there these days. But it is really difficult to kind of extract them from the ward and provide them with experiences. I mean, there are things like inviting them to the departmental echo meeting and all those kinds of things, but I think we need to think about the mechanics of how we can provide those experiences for them.
So it's a really good point. And I absolutely recognise in my own institution, it's really hard to get people down to clinics. And I think one of the benefits to come out of the COVID crisis is that there is this general recognition that education has changed forever. And I think, to give due credit to the BJCA, they saw that certainly before the BCS did, and I think before a lot of other people did, and switched education to virtual platforms. And I think we have to grasp this in terms of exposing people at an early stage to the different subspecialties of cardiology. And I think we have an opportunity here to, so for instance, for the CMT2 who's thinking about doing cardiology, who's persuadable by one of Paul's trips to Costa that this might be a reasonable thing to do, even if they end up paying. But actually, just having a library, say you need to go and look at this. You need to go and have somebody doing ACHD saying, right, this is what I do. This is what's involved. Because I've been a consultant cardiologist now for just a shade over 25 years, and it's been fantastic. And one of the great things about cardiology, and I think more so a lot of other sports is you can morph what you do during the course of your career. And I've done that a lot. I started off as an interventionist and I kind of changed tack sort of 2 or 3 times now. But, and if I was starting out again, and I would kind of generally almost quite like to do that, I'd probably do ACHD because I think it's absolutely fascinating what you can do now. And so I can't believe that other people will find it fascinating, won't find it fascinating as well. And I think if you say, well, and your point about ACS, I think is quite well made. And actually some aspects of interventional cardiology look pretty much, it's ACS. Yeah. You start getting people involved in actually, this is what a TABI looks like. This is the decision-making process. This is what you can do. The same with some of the transformational stuff that you can do in people with heart failure, in terms of medication, in terms of complex devices. Some of the I mean, I was called into the EP lab the other week by one of our EP guys because he was so blown away by this mapping picture of left atrial flutter. He just wanted to show it to me, and I went in and I was blown away by it too. And that's EP, for goodness sake. And yeah, so I think we have some very interesting experiences that we can use to sell, and we need to be a little bit more inventive about the tools that we use to do that. And I think you're absolutely right, Lynn. The traditional model of come and sit with me in clinic for a morning has a huge number of strengths, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to do. And we've got to recognize that people are going to want to do this on their own terms and in their own time.
Sarah, can I just chime in there and say, you're probably aware that Rebecca and myself have run a couple of these regional women in cardiology evenings, which part of it has been like a taster. So we've got people from all the different subspecialties across the broad church that's cardiology to talk to predominantly medical students in tier 1. And the feedback we get is, wow, I didn't know that there was this many subspecialties in cardiology. I didn't know you could do this. And actually, to Lynn's point about ACHD, that was one of the most popular sessions we had, because you're absolutely right. Especially as a medical student and a tier 1 on a busy general cardiology ward, you really get no experience at all. So I think the point you make is very well made, that, and taste, I know these are small possibilities, but these taster evenings, we found them to be really very popular. So this is something that could be rolled out across the regions quite easily.
Paul, can I just pick on something I've just seen coming up on the chat from Emma Lane, and this is about the role of cardiac physiologists in selling cardiology. And I think this again is a really good point. And we've certainly used that quite a bit in our institution. We have some inspirational cardiac physiologists in the unit, and it is a real opportunity to get people to, as students, to get involved with cardiac, is to expose them to the work that the physiologists do, which is, I think at that level it's very interesting, and it will be a really good way of getting people interested in an early stage.
No, absolutely, and Emma's certainly very good at inspiring people. So fully agree. That's a great example of that. I think, Simon, highlighting the chat. I'm not sure if everyone has been looking at the chat. There's some really important things in the chat in the background, and as well as highlighting that, Alex, I think I totally agree with what you were saying about the need to invest in individuals as the juniors, as well as showcasing what we do and the specialty that we all love and enjoy working in and are enthused about. It is, I think, that you're right that there often isn't the same sense of the team working that I think Simon, Alison, certainly myself of that era experience, when we got to know people in the team and were following the patients through, seeing what interventions we had made, see the outcomes of those, and I think you know, in some respects that was a lot easier than how it is today, and spending the time getting to know people and showing some appreciation and encouragement is definitely vital. So I think very good points on that. Chris, did you have any points specifically from a BJCA perspective as well to bring in?
Thanks, Paul. Well, first I just wanted to say how incredibly optimistic it is, or optimism inducing it is, to see so many people here on a Thursday evening motivated and interested in tackling this. I guess it's not a particularly earth-shattering observation to show that not enough of them are men. I guess a point that I would make that I heard come up a few times is about whether we need to induce culture change in what we have at the moment, which I think, given some of the data that we've touched upon, it seems fairly self-evident that we do. And I mean, the people in this room are not the problem, right? I think that's fair to say. So I'm interested in what people feel about what we do about those who demonstrably are. You know, I mean, even way before my time, I know Alison and Shriller and others published that paper back in 2005-ish in Heart that was talking about too few women being in cardiology and needing to have mentorship and needing to induce culture change, etc. So, you know, so the base issues have been around for a while. We've been trying to tackle some issues around sexism and other hostile cultures, and you know, we haven't made a great deal of headway so far, if this year's data is anything to go by. So I guess my question is to those particularly those in leadership positions who are on the call, you know, with our kind of bag of carrots and sticks, what can we do to induce some culture change in those colleagues of ours who are putting people off the specialty?
Well, Paul, I mean, I can, I suppose, an attempt to answer that, and again, this is very much from a personal perspective, is that in my experience, trying to force people to change doesn't work, and that is irrespective of whether the issue is sexism or anything else. Any behavioural change, trying to force somebody to change their way of working and interaction with other people is a fruitless task. And I think what we collectively need to do is to generate a situation where it becomes simply unacceptable to behave in those ways. And you don't do that by leaning necessarily on individuals. What you do is you start with the kind of low-hanging fruit type people, and it will gradually spread out. And I think it's self-evident that that is happening. And if you and progress is not as fast as any of us would like to see it or believe it should be, but it is clearly changing. And I'm pretty confident that that pace will change, because I think there is a general. So if we go back to the BSIS meetings, right, and you know, I've been to BSIS meetings since about 1990, I think, and they were bastions of laddism, basically, and that is gradually changing. But that process has accelerated a lot in the last couple of years. And the fact that Nick Curzon now has this working group going through BSIS, the fact that Claire is the honorary secretary, I mean, these are all in themselves relatively small things, but they do start to add up. And I'm optimistic that within a pretty short period of time, there will be such that it will be simply unacceptable to behave in the way that people used to behave. And I think there is, you know, inevitably, there is a generational element to this, because people tend to behave in the way that they were behaved to themselves as trainees or junior consultants. And as that generation, which I guess is probably my generation, disappears off the scene, I think that will be another way that the culture within cardiology will change. So I would like to think that if we continue to pull all the levers that we're pulling now, we've described quite a lot of different approaches to that. In the vast majority of cases, that will be the way that we get change. Now, that is not to say that there will not be instances where individuals need to be held to account for specific aspects of very poor behavior. But those are actually quite uncommon, and it's more the lower level lower level in the sense that it's not going to justify referral to the GMC. The lower level harassment, bullying, disregard for diversity that we need to see disappear, and I think it's that which will be tackled better by this sort of collective change that we're trying to engender. So I'm sorry, it's a rather rambling answer, but it's a complex question.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. And I completely agree. I do think, and I mentioned it in the chat, that actually I think things have changed very dramatically from the times when I was a trainee. I was very clearly, without shame, told that women shouldn't do intervention, and actually even cardiology really wasn't a place for women. Same as Alison, I think, experienced, maybe even from the same professor of cardiology. But anyway, I think BCS is very different now. For the last few years that I've been up to the conference, I've noticed that there aren't any manels really. There are very few manels. There's a woman on most of the panels now, and last year, and I think the year before, they had discussions with Cara, Hendry, and a few others who talked. I think Claire was actually talking on one of those as well, about work-life balance, about issues that are actually important to women and men. And I think actually as a specialty, we just need to become a little bit more of a sort of family-friendly specialty, generally, especially in intervention, but across the board. I think the world has very much improved. BCS, Nick Curzon, fantastic president, has changed things very dramatically. 3 of the council now are female. So there's Claire, myself, and Rasha. And so things have changed. I mean, I can remember BCS was completely a boys' club when I was a trainee, and I never imagined that any woman would ever get onto council. So that's very positive. The BCS council group, there's a focus group of women in cardiology, which a lot of the women here are on, and some men as well. And we are actually writing a report to investigate the problems from medical students and up, all the way through in terms of recruitment and retention, and actually come out with some suggestions in a report within, I hope, the next year. So I think things are going to be better. We really do need it in intervention. It's only 4.8% of British interventionists are female, so we really need to move forward with that. But I think, I think it's a very positive time, and I think it's a great time to be a trainee because things are very different and you're very supported and you have a lot of role models and now mentors. So thank you, Sarah, for your fantastic programme, and Rebecca, well done.
Thank you very much. And I think this is certainly what I wanted to transmit in this evening. Yes, there are problems, but there have been lots of improvement over the last years. And although I'm only a baby registrar and I've not experienced what it was like 10 years ago, I think there are lots of reasons to be positive about, and seeing 60 people in this room being interested in women in cardiology and improving the life of women in cardiology is very encouraging. And I want to use that opportunity to thank everybody for not only just being part of this and donating their time this evening, but also going away, being inspired, and making this world a better place.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. I mean, my part, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a really interesting evening. I've spent a lot worse Thursdays than this one.
No, fully agree, and thank you all to joining and participating, and hopefully continuing to work with Sarah, Rebecca, and everyone else to drive forward some of the positive changes that we've been discussing and some of the positive ventures moving forward. And I think that has been, you know, really inspiring to me, not only the numbers, but also the fact that it, you know, it's the positivity about making change happen. And I think, you know, that's precisely what Sarah wanted. She didn't want this to be people coming on and necessarily moaning about experiences. It's about what changes can be made going forward. And I think you've achieved that really, really well, Sarah. So thank you very much again. And it's probably a good time to bring the meeting to an end. And it's certainly well beyond wine o'clock for me anyway. So to go and do that. So good. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for taking part. I will send the recording around if you wish, and I hope you have a nice cool drink, whatever that might be.
Well done, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well done, Sarah. Fantastic evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Bye, Nanite.
Bye. Nice to see you. Thank you for being part of this.
No, it's great to be part of it. It was a fantastic evening. You feel like you're away out in Northern Ireland, you're on your own, but it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep the Twitter messages up.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. It was really good.
Hi.
Really enjoyed it. Hi from Wales.
Hi. I don't have many connections to Wales, so please go get in touch with me. And
definitely. There's our training program director actually is female. Her name's Dr. Claire Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly I'll sort of try and put you in touch as seeing as we're a mutual now. I'm a mutual. Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Claire, and hopefully we can share our experiences too. So thanks for organising it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being part of this evening.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Sarah. It was fantastic. Thank you.
I'm glad you feel inspired. I mean, I think Alison Carver certainly did her part of inspiring us all. I mean, who does not want to do interventional cardiology now?
What else?
I know. But I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for sticking around. I know it's a bit late, and I think certainly I will try a glass of wine now.
Of course. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, Tin. How are you?
I'm fine. Just came back from call. Today's quite a bad day, but that's good. That's good to see that the organization that cares that kind of things and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it certainly came across from the big bosses. Professor Curzon has actually been part of the panel, but unfortunately couldn't make it this evening. And I think there is movement, and I think we just need to keep up the momentum and collaborate with each other. And if we do that, I have no doubt that in many years to come, the life will be even better.
You're amazing. Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Nafisa. Thank you, Aisha, for joining.
Hi.
Hi, Aisha.
You're around. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for joining.
No worries. It was great. I think it's fabulous that you guys actually have this open conversation. If I had one question, it would be, how did you actually start this kind of movement? Because I think Nafisa will agree that this is something we need happening in our countries.
Yes.
Yeah. I think having my role is a start, and having the goal of being obsolete in my role is a really nice goal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think having just recognized that this role is required is the start, isn't it? It's recognizing the problem. And it's the same with the patient. Once they recognize there's a problem, I need to change my life. This is the start.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
this has thankfully been taken off me by my predecessor. So I've just sort of stepped onto the moving wagon to make change. So hopefully we will achieve a lot from here.
But don't you agree, Aisha, in our country we have to make change in the female themselves, then start to change the belief of other men's, because we encounter problem and fears in the females themselves. They try to avoid cardiology and something like this.
Yeah, I think this is what Alison Calver wanted to sort of highlight about the fact of speaking on panels. She doesn't like it, and I'm sure that I don't like it, and I'm sure there are lots of other people who don't. And it is sort of pushing yourself to accept the challenge, isn't it? Rather than, it's a multifactorial thing.
It is, yeah. And I guess, I mean, it actually is two ways. One of them is that you need to motivate yourself, and the other is actually womaning up to the challenge, because like everybody has already pointed out so well, it really is an old boys club, and sort of penetrating that system is the first challenge. I think once that has been done, because for example, in our national society, I think for years together, we haven't had a single female member. We forget about a WIC representative. We just don't have anyone in the executive membership. So I think that itself is a start, but then who is going to offer themselves up for that is the other question.
What do the others feel in the room? Mihak?
Thank you, Sarah. I was just going to say I'm an internal medicine trainee. I'm really hoping to apply for Cardiology. I've been really inspired today. So I was just going to say, it's wonderful just listening to all of you. You've been really inspiring in this area. And I'm actually doing cardiology at the moment. And I've had some lovely consultants, mostly men, but lovely consultants who've really, taken my liking for cardiology seriously and be encouraging and actually very helpful in the way I should be preparing my portfolio and stuff for the future. So I've received great support. But
how did you know about the event?
So I think it's a consultant you may have actually worked with, Ben Sionkovic.
Oh yes, indeed.
Yeah, so he basically because I'm doing him, and he basically emailed me and said, you should join this webinar. And I was like, yeah, definitely. So yeah, here I am.
Wow. I mean, feel encouraged to email me, phone me if you have any questions. We are exactly at this part where we want to encourage people like you who are thinking about it to give it a final push and get you through interviews. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, at my point, I'll take any advice and every one's opinion and help. I'd be in touch. Thank you.
Get in touch. And thank you for joining this evening.
No, thank you. It's lovely. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah, for the talk. So I've been working with Dr. Dobson to get the data together for this female speaker.
Hi, Rachel.
So I'm only a medical student, so it's been really encouraging to see.
Not say you're only a medical student. You are our future.
It's been really encouraging to see so many women in cardiology. And as Rebecca said, it's definitely helped me to see myself in that specialty. So thank you so much for this.
Spread the word, encourage others.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I can see some more people. If there's anything else you want to add to this wonderful evening, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'll be closing the meeting.